how do you generate revenue? How does John Soat close deals or generate revenue for the app?
Yeah,
What
it's
are
a great
some of your
question.
strategies?
So I think more leaning into my like experience in the design world, but I was with a friend the other day and he ran like business development at a design studio that I worked at. And so his job is just sales. Like it is just like
Mm.
presenting the company in a way to get new gigs. And so I asked him, I don't know, we're having chatting and I just kind of point blank of like, how did you do that? Like, what is your strategy? I think I asked him, a pretty similar question. Someone that certainly knows way more than me about sales. And he's like, I would just go into those meetings. I know deeply who they are, and not just who they are, but why are they talking to us? There's a reason that this person is talking to you, or the reason that this person's found your app or website, like thinking in that term. And and then being just extremely clear and simple about like, what is your value to their life? Like, what are you going to do for them? And it's about being just like not promising insanity or like using smoke and mirrors to like confuse them or to be like, wow, this is a way bigger company than I expect. It's like, no, this is what we do. This is why you're talking to us right this moment, and this is what I can help you with. And people really respond to that authenticity and realness of like, oh, okay, I get that. And if they don't like it, you probably don't want to work with them either. Like if it's a product or whatever that is, and you kind of confuse someone into purchasing your thing, they're going to figure out that it's not something they want. The
Mhm.
only like, if you're not truthful about what the benefit that you're providing, then you're going to get crazy churn. There's no one's going to stay around, and they know that like what you're selling isn't real. So I think that the combination of preparation, knowing who you are, and then clarity of message is totally invaluable with closing a deal. But essentially it was capacitive touch. So you could press more firmly into your screen and different things would happen.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh,
see, sadly, that was everyone's reaction. It was like, oh, I know what you're talking about, but I've never done it.
it's a
Yeah.
screensaver, wasn't it? And then like the fish would swim if you held
Oh,
your
yeah, yeah,
thumb down
yeah.
on it. And then it would,
Exactly.
or like the arts would, it would move, but not so much. It would just do the same animation over and over again in kind of loops. And I had to just keep on pressing it over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my thought was that like it was adding a new axis to how we interact with our devices. At the time, it was very like swipe tap based, but because there was like a 0 to 100% firmness now, I can create different actions based on how hard I'm pressing, and I felt like it was opening this door for a nuance of like UI design that hadn't really been explored. Unfortunately, it's been kind of taken over by long press. I think that's what we've now replaced. It just wasn't used in, I don't think there was enough media designed for it that really got to explore how valuable it could have been. Anyway, the reason that is the kind of marker of when Non started is that I was meditating a lot personally, and I would use a meditation timer. All I wanted was just silence. I was like, okay, just give me anything. What is simple and straightforward. I don't need to look at a lot of buttons. And so 3D touch was exciting because I was like, oh, I can generate an interface that has no buttons. It is like as little as possible. Like if the goal of what I'm doing is to I'm probably meditating because I look at my phone too much already. So I don't want my phone to add noise to my life. And especially in, no knock on, I was using Insight Timer a lot at the time. And they're kind of one of the larger meditation apps that exist now. And they're great. And I think they've done an amazing job at like disseminating practice of meditation to a much larger audience. But at the time, there are probably 40 buttons on the home screen just to start a meditation. And that alone was just like immediately dissonant with that practice. This is kind of pre like dark mode, light mode era of design. And I was like, I would open this app in the middle of the night, or not even necessarily that app. I think it was a darker screen at the time, but I'd open a certain app in the middle of the night and I'd be like, oh my God, it's like blindingly white. Like this, it's not reacting to me and sensitive to my practice. And so I was like, I just want a timer that has no buttons or as few as possible and adapts to me in that moment. And so I kind of brought this idea to a friend who he's a creative technologist and developer. And we kind of set out on the journey of just like, okay, what is this thing? There's kind of probably a lot to unpack there, but it definitely evolved over the course of the next, I don't know, however many years, whenever the iPhone 6 came out.
Yeah, no. So, it sounds like a progression of just like your experience and what you wanted to feel. So really you're focusing on your personal experience. Like there's a problem. Whenever I want to meditate, I look at the phone and it just blinds me because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of buttons and it's counterproductive to meditation because when you want to meditate, you want to unpack, you want as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And for me, I just want to breathe. I want to hear the trees, the wind.
Yeah.
Like I want it very, very simple. And if I have to think of the buttons, I have to like choose the meditation technique that I'm going to do for that day. I've already lost that sense of meditating, which is quieting my mind down. So it's actually making me think even more. And so over time, you realize, okay, I just want something as simple as possible because less is more. The way we breathe. I want to have an app that would react to the way I am today. And I think, there's no aha moment for that. That is a journey. That's how our mind works in a way. Like you can't just be like overnight, oh, I have this idea. This is you.
Yeah.
Non is you, like productized.
Yeah, it certainly came out of like just my passion and excitement around things. Like I, lived in San Francisco in my early 20s. And like, I think the first week or two I was there, I went to a party, and I met this guy, and he's like, "Hey, I just got my license in acupuncture." I'm like, I don't know anything about that. And so he's like, "Well, it's sliding scale, come check it out." So I go, I'm like in the waiting room, and I pick up this book called Buddhism Is Not What You Think. And he had like a double booked appointment. So I had like probably an hour to like wait and read this book. And I grew up like very Catholic, like going to church every Sunday. And so the idea of like Zen and like your mind having, in Stoic and Buddhist philosophy was just like absolute, every line was a mind explosion to just like the fear-based mentality, I think, that I had, just kind of growing up in that culture. And then I have this acupuncture session, and I'm sitting there in this chair, I'm seated, and for maybe a second or two, I literally like leave my body and I'm looking down at myself in the chair. And I mean, it was just like, oh my God. By the time I actually realized what was going on, I snapped back and was sitting in the chair again. But from that moment, it was just like, I have to understand more of why this is happening. Like, how did I unlock this like bizarre hypnagogic state that I've never experienced in my life? Like, where did this come from? And so it was this kind of like, still lifelong journey of like exploring consciousness and how meditation is impacting your mind. And in that moment, and so, yeah, meditation I kind of carried through for a long time. I studied at a place called Spirit Rock in Marin County. Jack Hornfield started, amazing place, like especially for like walking meditation. It's like in the hills in Marin. Highly recommend people going and checking out. Also, the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. If people are not familiar, it's the most special place in the world. It's like in the cliffs of Big Sur. It's a hot spring, but like amazing classes you can take as a student. You can it's pretty expensive if you go as a like normal patron, but you can actually do a work study and do it for extremely cheaply. And so that was really kind of like my meditation background. I feel like the West Coast vibes really turn that on as you're feeling. I think what's fascinating about meditation in terms of like how it's being portrayed now is that like, oh, you either meditate or you don't, or it's like, oh, I need to start meditating to be, have a clearer mind or to be more productive. But like meditation is happening all the time if you let it. If you sit down and eat your lunch, if you do that with a mindful attitude, like that is meditation. Like just because you have an app that's telling you what to think, that can open some crazy fractal portal into another mindset that you're like, okay, I didn't know I could think like that. But that it is on the surface of everything. It's just attentiveness and sensitivity and openness. And, we always have access to that.
So from freelancing to becoming a founder, what were the tips or what were the things that you had to do in order to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, really for me, it was being pushed and putting yourself in a situation where you will be pushed to actually make that leap. And mine was the New Museum. It's like an art museum in New York, but they had, what was really unique at the time, it was an incubator, incubator accelerator. I don't know what they really describe it as, but it was different than a traditional accelerator where it was for artists specifically that had some sort of like business aspiration. So a typical incubator would be like, okay, we're gonna give you $100,000 and here's 6%, take 6% equity or whatever that might be.
Yep.
Whereas this was, they weren't giving you money. It was this like free environment and workspace and all these connections to like figure out how to be an entrepreneur as an artist. And so it was the first time, I got really deep as a freelancer. I got in the kind of weeds of like, okay, I'm making money from these companies. I'm just like a designer. I'll make your thing, cool, and then I'll move on and kind of iterate in that. Whereas this is the first time, artistry and entrepreneurship are very in line, because it's like, okay, what do I care about? That is like that is the foundation of like making that decision to make work or to make a company, and maybe that's making money or capitalizing on an idea, and that's okay. Like, do your thing. But it also could be like, oh, I'm passionate about cleaning up the oceans, and so that's going to be my company. Or I'm really passionate about creating impressionist, landscapes, and that's what your art is going to be, like, whatever that is. But it really forced me to be like, what do you actually want to generate in the world versus just like making things. And so, it forced me to really just start as a company. And so we started Non at that time. That was maybe 5 years ago. But in parallel, we started a design studio. Similar, we kind of took this business model. Our plan was never to go to the like VC route of like, okay, we're going to be this like unicorn meditation app, especially at the time, like, the Headspaces and Calms of the world like did exist. And they're appealing to like a really mass market, like bringing meditation to as many places and people as possible, which is amazing. And I'm, so thankful that, they've been able to do that. But the route that we wanted to take was similar to, if you're familiar with Us2, they're like a gaming studio / design studio. They made Monument Valley. It's like a game for iOS. It was based on like MC Escher drawings, where it's like infinite staircases and you rotate these shapes and there's puzzles. Anyway, it's an amazing iOS game. But their model was essentially, let's make amazing products that sell and that we can make a baseline. But in order to like grow as a functional business, we'll also make other people's apps, and we'll build, so it's this almost like your portfolio is your product, or the things that you can make. So we kind of took that business model and worked on a design studio in parallel with Non. And so running a design studio allowed us the kind of freedom to work on Non as much as we wanted, because we had so much more freedom of time. It was like, okay, this client project's going to take us 3 weeks, but that gives us 4 months to work on Non. And so it's this kind of relationship of like, okay, how do we, let's book new work so that we can kind of pay for that ability to be an entrepreneur and to make a thing. But I think that leap comes from just giving yourself time and space to do the thing. Like if you're working your 9 to 5, you can get up, the like stories, look at what Mark Wahlberg's like crazy town schedule. He's like, I get up at 2:30 and I'm like eating hard-boiled eggs. And I'm like, yo, that is like, you're another human being. Like if you can do that.
Yeah, that's Arnold's schedule.
Yeah. And there's some like humans that can do that. And habit creation is so vital to like doing any of this and to doing it well. But also sometimes you need a month of space to just do this thing. And so freelancing actually was an amazing door that allowed me to be like, oh, I can spend the next 4 months and like just make a thing, where I'm like, I'm not like having to grind at my day job and then like fit it in over the weekend. So yeah, it definitely made that much more possible. Yeah.
Was that intentional? Did you like, say to yourself, hey, I can have more freedom as a freelancer and I can build my business versus having a 9 to 5 job and then build my own startup company? Or it just happened that way?
I would say it was probably pretty organic, but when you're deep in 9 to 5 life, like when you've been working the same job, it's hard to see outside of that and to be constantly motivated, because you also don't have, you know, I've heard of, I think even on the episode, I just listened to an episode of your show where you had Arnold talk about it, and he's like, that safety net of like, oh, okay, I can always fall back on this, you know, maybe doesn't allow you to motivate to do the thing. And not saying that you should just cut all ties and, you know, without a net, just go and do your thing. Cause like, that's, you know, maybe not sound advice if maybe your idea is not good, or you're not ready for it, or you don't have the resources or whatever that is. But just like being a freelancer, you're going to have time because a project ends, and then you can either choose to get a new project and find the next gig, or you can be like, okay, I have enough money to last for the next, you know, 6 months. I can spend 3 of that and just do what I need to do. And I think even as just a freelancer, it allowed me to become a better designer and thinker in many ways, because I was being forced to work on so many different projects and with different people, but also I had time to just build my skill sets too. I think we take for granted the time that is needed for rest to come back with a ton of energy. Or when I'm freelancing, I have so much more time to just study and be a student again, and be like, oh yeah, I've kind of lost my, you know, I'm not as sharp on the latest like Cinema 4D stuff. Like I need to catch up and like do my thing. And then you come back and you're like, oh my God, I'm a different person. Yeah. And so just kind of living outside the grind for a moment gives you that space to kind of do your thing. It's great.
Yeah, you're so multifaceted. I've been so stuck in the 9 to 5 job lately. Like I do feel a little stifled with my creativity. I feel like everything I do is like either like localization, or sales. Like I'm stuck in these two like pillars. At the same time, I love it. I do love learning more about these industries, but I'm not quite sure if that is really me. Whereas I'm looking at you and you're learning like 3D, regenerative art, like all of these crazy things that you're experiencing. You're not just stuck in one type of art. I mean, you're so robust. This might be a really nice strategy, which is, be a freelancer, learn as much as you can. You don't have to just be like an SEO marketer. You could also learn a lot of different types of marketing.
I think because I've worked a number of like full-time gigs too, and there is something that you get from that you don't. Like I don't mean to be so idealistic about like the freelance lifestyle. I think what it affords most is freedom of time and space. Just inherently it's baked in. But with a full-time job, you get to really learn from people in a really deep way, especially if you love, like you are, you know, a mentee, or like there's someone you believe in, of like, oh my God, you watch them present you know, to a client, you're just like in awe, and you're like, how do I do that? And the only way that you really get that sort of relationship and